Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It was a silent night. Blake was sitting on the couch, remote in hand, flipping through channels without really focusing on anything. The room was hushed, illuminated only by the bluish glow of the TV. Outside, the city continued as usual, vehicles passing in the distance, the wind blowing against the windows. Lauren had said she'd be working late, which wasn't uncommon in recent months. He trusted her, or at least he thought he did. Then the phone buzzed. The sound cut through the silence and Blake looked at the screen without much urgency. Unrecognized number. He thought about ignoring it, but something inside him made him pick up. Hello? On the other end there was a serious, formal voice. Good evening, sir. This is St. Anthony Hospital. Are you a relative of Lauren Collins? Hearing her name made his heart race. He sat up, feeling a wave of concern rise in his chest. Yes, I'm her husband. What occurred? The pause before the answer felt like it lasted forever. Your wife was brought to the hospital a few minutes ago. She was unconscious, discovered in a motel along with another man. Blake's stomach twisted. For a second he thought he'd heard incorrectly. What? His voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. She's already receiving treatment, don't worry. We just wanted to let you know what's happening and ask you to come down here. The call ended, but the sentence kept reverberating in Blake's head, discovered in a motel along with another man. He felt lightheaded. The remote slipped out of his hand and fell to the floor with a dull thud, but he barely noticed. His world stopped right then and there. All the details from the past few weeks flooded his mind like a torrent. The messages Lauren sent saying she was overwhelmed at work. The night she came home late and went straight to the shower. The lack of communication during the day. Now it all made sense, like pieces of a cruel puzzle he never wanted to solve. He got up suddenly, blood boiling. He had to go to the hospital. He needed to see it with his own eyes. He grabbed his car keys and rushed out of the house, barely feeling the chill of the night as he crossed the yard and got into the car. The engine roared when he turned the key, and soon he was on the road, driving faster than he should have. The drive was a blur. Every red light felt like it lasted an eternity. The city lights whizzed by, but in Blake's mind, time was crawling under the weight of betrayal. A man and a woman in a motel with another man. He clung to the possibility of some error, some misunderstanding, some outrageous explanation that could make it all a terrible mix-up. But deep down, he knew there was only one truth. When he finally saw the brightly lit hospital building, his heart started racing again. He parked carelessly and got out, walking quickly to the reception desk. The nurse looked at him with a formal demeanor, but Blake knew she'd seen that expression on people's faces before. Lauren Collins, he said, his voice firm but tense. She typed rapidly on the computer and glanced at him. Room 312, third floor. He nodded and didn't even thank her. He stepped into the elevator and jabbed the button hard. The doors closed, and as he went up, anger and pain twisted together inside him like poison. He had no idea what he'd discover on the third floor, but he knew nothing would ever be the same. The elevator doors slid open with a soft sound, but to Blake it was deafening. He hurried out, footsteps echoing on the cold hospital floor. The corridor was illuminated with that impersonal white light, and the sharp smell of antiseptic hung in the air. In the distance, a nurse was pushing a gurney while a doctor spoke quietly to a patient in a wheelchair. None of that mattered. Room 312. Every room number on the door seemed to drag by until he finally found the one he was looking for. He took a deep breath before turning the handle and walked in. Lauren was lying in bed within four walls. She looked pale and exhausted, but she was awake. For an instant, when her eyes met his, Blake saw something there, fear, guilt maybe, but the next second she seemed to pull herself together, sitting up a little like she was trying to take control of the situation. "Blake," she said, her voice rough, hesitant, but laced with fake surprise. He didn't answer. He just stood there staring, trying to recognize the woman he believed he knew so well until a few hours ago. Lauren put a hand to her forehead and sighed. I don't know what occurred. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to come up with a lie on the spot. I was at work and suddenly. I don't remember anything else. I just woke up here. Blake felt his blood boil. She was lying, and doing it as casually as if she were describing her breakfast. He crossed his arms, keeping his voice steady. You were discovered in a motel, Lauren. With another man. She hesitated for just a second. The truth hit her like a punch, but she was ready with another lie. Motel? That doesn't make any sense. She let out a nervous laugh, but her expression fell when she realized Blake wasn't reacting. He wasn't there to watch a performance. A heavy silence filled the room. Then he continued, his voice colder than he ever thought he could use with the woman he'd called his wife until that night. The doctors told me everything. You and he were found passed out. He managed to call for help before he blacked out. Lauren lowered her eyes, her hands twisting in the bed sheet. For the first time, she looked genuinely nervous. She tried to swallow, tried to find some way out, but every door was closed. Blake felt a heaviness in his chest. It wasn't just the cheating that crushed him, it was the blatant dishonesty. She could have at least had the decency to admit it, to own up to what she did. But instead, she chose to insult his intelligence. The silence between them was stifling. Lauren opened her mouth, maybe to try once more to defend the indefensible, but before she could say anything, the door opened again. A nurse walked in, holding a clipboard. Sorry to interrupt. I just need to run a few tests. Blake nodded, taking a deep breath. He couldn't stay there, not now. Without another word, he turned and left. He walked down the corridor without looking back, each step feeling like lead. The woman he loved was in that hospital bed, but there was nothing left to save. Blake left the hospital with his chest feeling tight. The night air was cold, but it wasn't enough to put out the fire of rage and disappointment burning inside him. Lauren hadn't just betrayed him, she'd also had the nerve to lie right to his face. He wanted to believe this nightmare would end here, that he could just move on with his life, but something told him there was more to it than he knew. The next day, doubt started consuming him. He couldn't stop thinking about details that didn't add up. How did both Lauren and that man end up unconscious at the same time? And how had her lover managed to call 911 before passing out? Something felt wrong. Blake had no interest in knowing more about her affair, but the strangeness of the situation wouldn't leave him alone. Then that afternoon, an unexpected call came. Mr. Collins? This is Detective Wilson from the local police. We're investigating the incident involving your wife, and we think you need to hear a few things. Blake frowned, a chill running down his spine. What kind of things? We found some strange substances in your wife's tests, as well as in the man who was with her. At first we thought it was an accidental overdose, but then we discovered the food they ordered at the motel was poisoned. Someone put something in their dinner. Blake stayed silent for a moment, caught off guard. What does that mean? It means it was a setup. A crime. Over the next few minutes, the detective explained an even more shocking truth. The police had discovered that the man's wife, Patricia, had found out about the affair weeks ago. Driven by rage, she decided it wasn't enough just to confront them, she wanted revenge. Patricia bribed a motel employee, someone who worked in the kitchen, to spike Lauren's and her lover's food with a sedative. The plan was simple, to humiliate them and make sure they got caught in the worst way possible. The twist hit Blake hard. It didn't change the fact that Lauren had cheated. It didn't erase the pain or the lie she chose to tell. But now he realized something darker was at play. The betrayal was real, but there was a cruel edge to how it all went down. What's going to happen to that woman? Blake asked, still trying to take it all in. Patricia and the motel employee were arrested this afternoon. They'll be charged with premeditated poisoning. But we need your wife's statement once she's well enough. Blake took a deep breath. His mind was in chaos. He was still furious at Lauren, but now he also felt pity. She'd fallen into her own trap, victim of the affair she had chosen to have. He hung up and stared at nothing, heart heavy. The truth was uglier than he'd ever imagined. Lauren spent another week in the hospital. The doctors wanted to make sure the substance was completely out of her system, and the police needed time to take her statement. During that week, Blake didn't visit her once. He didn't text her, didn't ask about her condition, not because he wanted to punish her, but because he knew there was nothing left to say. While Lauren was still hospitalized, Blake made his decision. He didn't want her back in his house. The cheating had shattered any trace of trust, but the blatant lying was what sealed the fate of their marriage. On the third day of her hospital stay, he hired a lawyer. He wanted everything settled as quickly and cleanly as possible. He asked for divorce papers, no fights, no arguments. He didn't want endless conversations about what happened or give Lauren a chance to defend the indefensible. That week, the house felt emptier than ever. But it wasn't Lauren's absence that made the silence so heavy, it was the pain of disillusionment. He'd always believed their love was strong, that they could get through anything together. Now he realized their marriage had been a lie he'd been blind to for too long. When the hospital finally discharged Lauren, Blake was already there waiting, but not to take her home. He stood outside with a taxi beside him, her suitcases and a brown envelope in his hand. When Lauren came out the main doors, she looked pale and weak. Her eyes scanned the front of the hospital until she spotted Blake. The surprise on her face said it all. Maybe she thought he'd take her home. Maybe she believed that after the shock, he'd still give her a chance to explain, that he'd hear her apologies. But any hope she had faded when she saw the suitcases and the envelope. She walked up to him and stopped, hesitant. "What's this?" Blake held the envelope firmly, his expression calm. "Divorce papers. Everything's ready." She blinked a few times, like she couldn't believe what he was saying, like it was some sort of cruel joke. But it wasn't. I can't go back home." Her question came out in a whisper, full of a vulnerability she'd never shown before. Blake took a deep breath. He didn't feel anger anymore, just a deep exhaustion. "No." His voice was steady, no hesitation. There was no place for her in his life anymore. Lauren bit her lip, looking away. Maybe she thought he'd soften after the initial shock, that the love they once shared could still rescue her from the consequences of what she'd done. But it couldn't. Blake opened the taxi door. "Your mom's expecting you." "I called her and explained the situation." "You're going to her place." Lauren looked at the car, then at him. She seemed like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. She grabbed her suitcases, took the envelope with trembling hands, and with no other choice, got in. Blake stayed there watching the taxi drive off until it disappeared onto the avenue. He didn't feel immediate relief. He didn't feel happy, just certain he was doing the right thing. His marriage was over, but his life wasn't. Now he could start over. The taxi vanished down the road, taking Lauren away. Blake stood on the sidewalk, unmoving, not entirely sure how he felt. His anger no longer burned like before, but there was no sudden sense of freedom either, just a strange emptiness, like watching a part of his life crumble before his eyes. For years he'd believed that their marriage was forever, that Lauren was the woman he'd grow old with, building memories and facing life's ups and downs together. But in the end, all they had was a lie that went on for too long. Blake took a deep breath and got into his car. The drive home felt different from every other drive he'd ever taken. It was the first time he went back knowing there was no us anymore. For the first time, it was just him. Walking into the silent house, he felt a heavy weight on his chest. Every corner of that place held memories: the couch where they'd watched movies on weekends, the kitchen counter where Lauren would sneak bites of food before it was done, the bed they'd shared for so many years. Now everything felt like a frozen snapshot of something that no longer existed. He made his way to the living room and stopped in front of a framed photo on the shelf. It was a picture from their wedding, he and Lauren smiling, happy, with no idea what the future had in store. For a moment he felt a lump in his throat, not because he still loved her, but because he mourned what could have been. He picked up the frame and studied every detail of the photo. The illusion was right there, printed, framed, on display as a reminder of something that had never been as real as he'd thought. Without hesitating, he opened a drawer, took out a cardboard box, and started placing everything that reminded him of Lauren inside. Photos, notes, little gifts that once seemed important, one by one, they disappeared into the box. When he was done, he closed the lid, took the box, and went outside. He put it by the trash. It wasn't dramatic. He wasn't burning memories, ripping up photos, or shouting his pain. He was just letting go of the past. That night he lay in his empty bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence felt different now. It wasn't stifling. It wasn't heavy. It was the silence of a new beginning. In the following days, he filled his time with things he used to ignore. He started jogging every morning, picked up his guitar again, read books that had been collecting dust on the shelf. Life went on. He gradually realized the worst thing that had ever happened to him was also his path to freedom. Early one evening, Blake's phone rang. He was sitting on the porch, looking at the dark sky, feeling a little calmer than he had in weeks. The number on the screen was unknown, and for a second he thought about letting it go to voicemail. But something made him answer. "Hello?" On the other end there was a hesitant voice. "Blake? This is Ryan Martinez." Blake frowned. The name didn't ring a bell. "Who?" I'm the guy who was with your wife that night at the motel." Blake's blood ran cold. This was the last call he expected. His first instinct was to hang up, but for some reason he held on to the phone. He needed to hear what this man had to say. "Why are you calling me?" There was silence on the other end. Ryan took a deep breath before speaking again. "I know nothing I say can fix what happened, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry. Honestly, I didn't know things were like this." Blake tightened his grip on the phone, feeling a knot in his throat. "Like what?" "There's way more going on than you think." Ryan's tone sounded strange, not just guilty, like he was warning Blake. "What do you mean by that?" Blake asked, voice tense. Ryan hesitated, but in the end he got straight to the point. "I worked with Lauren at the office, and, well, I thought I was the only one." Blake's heart hammered. "What are you talking about?" Ryan sighed again before delivering the painful truth. She's got a history, man. Everybody at the office knew she hooked up with a bunch of guys there. It wasn't just me. Coworkers, supervisors, sometimes even clients." An icy silence followed. Blake felt like the ground had been yanked out from under him. He already knew she cheated once, but realizing Lauren had done this repeatedly, and that people at work knew about it, tore the wound open even wider. He'd always thought it was one awful mistake, but now he saw he'd been deceived for a long, long time. When he finally found his voice, it was shaky with disbelief. "Why are you telling me this now?" Ryan took a slow breath on the other end. "I heard you split up with her, and I didn't want you to make the mistake of going back if you were even thinking about giving her a second chance. I wanted you to know everything first." Blake clenched his jaw. "I never considered forgiving her." "Good," Ryan said, sounding relieved. "Because if you were thinking of it, I wanted to be sure you knew exactly who she is." Blake ran a hand over his face. Each word felt like a blow to his dignity. He thought the hurt had already peaked, but now he realized he'd been played for a fool far longer than he ever suspected. "You didn't have to tell me," Blake said, his tone flat. "Yeah, I did. I know I was a jerk, but I didn't want you stuck in doubt. Now you know who she really is." A few seconds of silence went by. Finally, Blake let out a long sigh. Then, without waiting for anything else, he hung up. He sat there feeling the cold evening breeze on his skin, his stomach twisted in knots, his mind flooded with images he didn't want. But deep down, he knew he had to hear it. More than ever, he was certain Lauren was a closed chapter. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.